Chapter 3, Belligerent. Monday, August 29, 2016 at 7:15 p.m. With a sense of urgency, Abby came knocking at the door, carrying a bunch of documents, which she placed on top of Amanda's table. This was followed by a long pause as they stared at each other. Okay. I was making an early report on the status of the company compared to its last 2 quarters of the year. Before your father's assassination, Lorena gave me instructions to prepare the report ahead of time, and apart from giving me access to the financial records of the Katsuyori Global, she also granted me access to the Foundation's bank account. I see, that's okay. We often make decisions independent from each other, but thank you for informing me, said Amanda. No. There's more. I haven't told you about my level of concern. During my analysis of the Foundation's bank statements, I have uncovered 7 different deposits amounting to $3,480 million, she said, making Amanda speechless and in extreme distress. Pulling a piece of paper from one of her folders, Abby handed Amanda a printout of a Mizuho bank statement, running her finger over the recent deposits made. Amanda took her time reviewing the printout, and pointed her finger to the 5th column of the table. Look at the date dispatched, that's almost a week before Father's death, and the value date of these deposits Thursday, June 9, 2016. What about the date? That's the exact date of Maurice Faux's fundraising art exhibit. I better call Lorena, Amanda said. She was about to make a phone call when she hesitated. After a relatively long pause, she took hold of her cell phone, disassembled the case to remove the SIM card, reached into her purse for a brand new SIM card, reassembled the cell phone, and called Lorena. Abby, having seen all of that, felt threatened and asked, Amanda, are we in danger? Surely you've already thought about this the moment you approached me, Amanda replied. Cell phone ringing. Hello. Lorena, this is Amanda, anxiously speaking. Kettle whistling in the kitchen. Hi Amanda, whose number are you using? Amanda walked across the room towards the kitchen to turn off the whistling kettle filled with boiling water. It doesn't matter, Abby and I might have stumbled on something very important. Where are you right now? I'm actually on my way to your place. I brought dinner. Okay, but please hurry, this is very urgent. While she was in the kitchen, a hand grenade shattered through the studio window, followed by 2 other grenades thrown from the outside. Abby, reacting late, attempted to run for cover, but her response time wasn't enough to get her to safety. The devastation of the blast extended through the entire floor, throwing Amanda off guard, and momentarily shocking. She felt her strength diminished and could barely stand holding on the side of her stomach on what felt like a broken rib. She then walked across the floor, through the corridor, and into the living room, where she saw her dead friend Abby. Falling to her knees, she picks up Abby's lifeless body while she trembles in fear and anger. A few minutes later, from a distance across the street, one could hear the squealing of the tires of a speeding car while it went around the corner before it came crashing into the gutter. Frantic for fear of losing her sister, Lorena disregarded even the presence of the Tokyo police. As she stormed out of her car, the 2 officers attempted to stop her, but she eventually overpowered them, forcefully removing the blanket that covered the corpse. Shaken by the blast that she heard over the phone, she must have thought that it was Amanda who lay dead before her. She looked around, ran towards the apartment, and found Amanda sitting on the foot of the staircase, talking to an officer. She reached out for her sister, and she embraced her for comfort. Hi, my name is Senior Police Officer Chihiro Washu of the Tokyo Metropolitan Department, he said, extending his arms for a handshake that Lorena accepted. I'm currently handling this case. May I know your relationship with Miss Amanda Katsuyori? My name is Lorena, Amanda's sister. Have any of your people checked the CCTV footage for possible evidence on who might have done this? Our men have already been instructed to review all CCTV cameras, including mobile CCTV vehicle footage in the area. We have interviewed a witness who mentioned seeing a suspicious yellow motocross dirt bike, possibly a Yamaha, wandering around early this morning. We will be homing in with this information, said Chihiro. Would there be anything that you might want to add to your sister's statement that might shed a little light on the investigation? I was on the phone, talking to my sister when it happened. I told her I was going to be late for dinner, and that's pretty much about it. If you can tell me what you and my sister talked about, maybe I can fill in the blanks, Lorena replied. The hint of hesitation and the absence of concrete details made the officer feel uneasy. You know, I'm well aware of the incident at Jigokudani Park that took your father's life. Please accept my sincere condolences. I've been following the reporting for quite some time. I can only imagine how difficult it is for you to trust anyone right now, but you need friends, and I'm someone you can trust. Senior police officer Chihiro reached into his pocket, took out his card holder, and handed Lorena one of his call cards, with a sheepish grin. Hold on that card in case something comes up, he added. Thank you, officer, replied Lorena. Shigeru Takasugi. Tuesday, July 16, 1991 at 10:30 p.m. Having been ordered by Paul Takuma to hunt down the neuroscientist who stole secrets from the tent robotics, Shigeru led his men to the alley of an old neighborhood apartment whose surroundings appeared to have been untouched by time with most of the units emptied. It was the perfect place to murder the thief who stole secrets from the tent robotics, believing that he would profit from selling it on the black market. Poor thing, Shigeru thought to himself, despite having a high-paying job, the ingrate still managed to double-cross his benefactor. Why can't people be content with what they have? The outer front door was made of a steel cage with a deadbolt, which was relatively easy to pick, considering the type of skeleton keys that Shigeru and his men carried, while the main door was surprisingly left unlocked. As they silently entered the apartment, the scent of burning incense instantly filled the room. It was almost pitch black inside due to the thick curtains that covered the windows. Shigeru signaled his men to stay still for a moment to accustom their eyes to the darkness. Moments later, at the end of a very narrow hallway, they would hear the sound of a person twisting a doorknob. A little boy in pajamas came out of the room, rubbed his eyes, and reached for the bathroom light switch. They waited until the young boy finished peeing, headed back to his room, and switched off the lights behind him. Shigeru didn't feel like killing a helpless boy whose only fault was to be the son of a dead man. So he ordered one of his men to sneak into the child's room and, with a hypodermic needle, administer a tranquilizer to make him fall into an even deeper sleep. Daybreak. As he leaned against the bathroom doorpost, Shigeru peeked inside to know what was happening, reaching out for his pocket to grab a Zippo and light his cigarette while his men tortured the traitor on the bathroom floor. I'm sorry, but should I sentence him to death, or are you still enjoying torturing the poor guy hoping that he would die from hypothermia? Shigeru said. I don't have all day, he added. The two men attempted to drown the traitor one last time, but he ordered them to stop. He just remembered that today was his daughter's high school recital, and they were running late. Glancing at his watch, he tossed the cigarette butt into the toilet, took out his knife from the inside of his suit, slit the traitor's throat, and fixed his tie using the mirror of the bathroom cabinet. Were you able to make him talk about the stolen documents before I slit his throat? Shigeru asked thoughtfully. With the mere stare of his men, the answer was obviously no. Staring at the exterior of the bathroom cabinet, he opened the panel doors to survey the interior. Goddamit, he instinctively murmured, and instantly ripped the box through its panel doors and out came the sealed envelope plastered on the wall. Get rid of the body, instructed Shigeru, who immediately exited the apartment, leaving everything else to his men. The 6th Yamaguchi-gumi. In the 1980s, Shigeru Takasugi would start his career as an unknown hoodlum soldier for the 6th Yamaguchi-gumi. He was a burakumin, an executioner, considered among the lowest wretches of humanity. When the Yama-ichi War broke out in 1985, rumors had it that Shigeru Takasugi was part of the hit squad sent by the Ichiwakai to assassinate Takenaka at his mistress's home in Osaka, which ignited the 2-year-long war known as the Yama-ichi KS. The call for help. Friday, September 2, 2016. In Japan, handguns and semi-automatic weapons are strictly prohibited, but on a privately owned property in Tsukuba, Ibaraki, Lorena removed the dust cover of her AK-47 as she sat on an old bench, cleaned its surface with a piece of cloth, and removed the spring and bolt recall rod. With a can of CLP cleaning solution, she sprayed the bolt, wiped it clean, and brushed out any unwanted carbon. Still unable to get Shigeru Takasugi out of her mind, with the bolt carrier, she wrote his name on the ground. Onsen, Amanda called out as she opened the kitchen screen door and came to her with a cup of coffee. Seeing the disassembled parts of the AK-47, she picked up a part and began to assemble it one by one, while Lorena watched with delight and surprise. "Where did you learn to assemble an AK-47 like that?" Lorena asked in disbelief. "Do you honestly think that you alone have exclusivity to Papa's arms and a free passage to the firing range?" Amanda replied. Lorena smiled as she took a drink of her coffee. "You know, you haven't called me Onsen for a very long time. I've been too engrossed with work to notice how you've become a beautiful lady." Amanda smiled and said, "Nothing to worry about, I'm guilty of that myself." Taking the automatic rifle from Amanda, she analyzes her work and finds it's pretty solid. "Do you know how these things work?" Lorena asked. "You point and shoot." Amanda answered with a gracious smile. "This piston is what operates the mechanism that rechambers the next round. As the bullet passes down the barrel, it travels through this port, allowing gas to enter this top nozzle, pushing back this piston, which moves the bolt, and the bolt rechambers from the magazine a new round. This piston right here is the reason why this piece of machinery does not falter. I'm telling you this because I won't be here forever. Sooner or later, you would have to become your own piston." "Why are you talking like that? You sound like you have stage 4 cancer," Amanda said, embracing her sister. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "I'll try to contact Shigeru to see if he's the one trying to kill us," Lorena replied. But for some inexplicable reason, she experienced an unexplainable phenomenon, an intuition. Jumping unexpectedly, she reached in desperation for her cell phone. "Lorena, what's wrong?" Amanda asked. "Tammy," exclaimed Lorena. "We haven't been paying attention to Tammy." Lorena desperately tried calling Tammy, but nobody was answering. Turning to her Aunt Yuiko's number, she would again get no reply. Amanda, on the other hand, tried to call the landline at Iamama, but there was no dial tone this time. During the commotion, while she redialed Tammy's number, an unknown call went through and she answered, "Hello. Hi, I understand that you're having a little problem with the phone company. I hope that it's not much of an inconvenience," said the man on the other line. Realizing that the man was using a voice modulator, she turned on the speakerphone. "Who is this?" asked Lorena. "Who I am is not important. What you should be asking is who I'm with." Attentively listening to the voice, tears fell from Amanda's eyes so quickly that Lorena only noticed the moment it fell to the ground. "Who are you with?" Lorena asked, adhering to what the enemy wanted. The caller handed the phone to a person who was either crying or was close to tears. "Onsen. Tammy. I'm so sorry, Onsen." At that moment, Amanda came closer to the speakerphone and reached out to Tammy. "Tammy, this is Amanda," she said. "Hi, Amanda. Tammy, be brave and stay strong, okay? We will get through this together." "Okay, Amanda," Tammy replied. With a slight tap on her shoulder, she signaled to Amanda that she would take over the call now. "Hello, Tammy. Onsen. I need to talk to the man in charge." Okay, said Tammy. Hello. Yes, thank you for letting us speak to our sister. What do you want? Your father stole a collection of documents from the tent robotics and stored it in a fortified vault in his study. Turn it over, and your sister is free. Failure to meet our demands or any attempt to inform the Tokyo police would result in the death of your sister. How do we guarantee that you will do what you say you will do once we've handed you the documents? Lorena asked. You will keep the $3,480,000,000 that your father has stolen. It's only a small amount, worthy of his contribution to the organization. All we want are those files. We will get in touch with you for more details. Gravely threatened, she nearly lost her balance due to an anxiety attack if Amanda hadn't grabbed her on time. Amanda picking up the cell phone. Hello. Yes. I just want to know, why did you have to kill Abby? It wasn't Abby whom we were trying to kill. One sister is enough for us to get what we wanted. You're the expendable one. End of call. As she laid down the cell phone on the table, Amanda felt her blood rushing into her head. It's not true that you're expendable, Lorena said. I'm okay with that. Feeling their strength sucked out in their body, Lorena said. You know it's gone. What's gone? The documents on the tent robotics. I saw the contents of the vault, and there was a furnace with ashes of burnt documents. But it doesn't matter, though. He's just trying to intimidate us, buy him some time, and keep our mouth shut. But sooner or later, he needs to get rid of us. Reaching into her pocket, she took out the key that was given to her by her father. Whatever the contents of those documents are, Papa must have transferred them to whatever this key unlocks. What was Papa's instruction again for that key? Asked Amanda. There was no instruction. Yes, there was. He said it contained the details. Yes, so what? Listen to your words. It doesn't say it opens anything. Realizing what Amanda was saying, Lorena forcefully snapped the rubber handle, and sure enough, the key revealed itself as a USB drive. Discovering the true purpose of the key, Lorena rushed to the house and immediately pulled her laptop from her bag and started to set it up on the kitchen table. Powering the computer, the USB drive was immediately inserted. It was encrypted, but it wasn't something she couldn't handle. As soon as the decryption was finished, she began to navigate through the folders. It contained a huge number of files containing a handful of the tent robotics project list, but it was the whole brain emulation folder that caught her most interest. The whole brain emulation, WBE, has been regarded by many to be a theoretical technology that has been commonly depicted in Hollywood science fiction films. The method involves modeling and digitizing a human brain for machine transfer, or vice versa. As the records have shown, the tent robotics under Paul Takuma's supervision carried out several unsuccessful tests, beginning with the process of erasing the memories of several unwilling subjects, causing permanent brain damage. The video clips horrified Amanda until she couldn't take it any longer, and she just cried in the corner. Amanda. Listen to me, we'll get over this, she said, rising from her seat and getting down to embrace her. I will not let anything happen to Tammy. A few minutes later, walking back to the table, she launched a browser window, typed academia.edu, logged into her user account, searching for an author named Jose Maria Alonso de Vera, with a research paper entitled The Book of Shadows Encoding the Shinobi. What are you doing? Amanda asked. I'm messaging the one person who can help us. At academia.edu, as soon as you try to download a document, you get a pop-up window informing you that your paper is ready for download. Intentionally ignoring this, she turned her attention to a prompt message telling her to let the author know what caused her interest in the specific paper, and that's how they got in touch with Shigeru Takasugi. After sending the message, she let out a sigh of relief, closed the lid of her laptop, and walked outside, and saw Amanda standing on the front porch. Is it done? Amanda asked. Yes, it's done. You think he got the message? I have no idea, Lorena replied. What happens if you're wrong about him? What if he is indeed the enemy? Tammy is going to die. Our only hope is that he will remain faithful to his promise that he will come to our rescue when we call for help. The rescue. A week after Lorena sent the message, Shigeru Takasugi, in his wetsuit, shut down the rubber boat's engine under the dazzling full moon and in the stillness of the night, and let it pass into the open sea for a while until the water became like mirrored glass. He leaned his head against the inflatable tubes, keeping a distance of 600 meters from the freighter, while taking a photograph of his daughter, Maya, from the waterproof pouch that he carried. After a few minutes of gazing, Shigeru ripped the photo, threw the pieces into the water, and began to unzip the medium-sized waterproof duffel bag containing his gear. His choice of weapon, an M4A1 assault rifle fitted with a suppressor, Glock 17 9mm fitted with a 17-round double-pack magazine, an exquisite 4.75-inch Smith & Wesson combat knife, and a pack of C4 plastic explosives. 2 hours past midnight, Shigeru began moving out, throwing his diver propulsion vehicle into the water and diving deep towards the freighter. Breathing more heavily underwater, Shigeru plunged deeper, but was suddenly startled by an abrupt encounter with a barracuda. Suffering minor injuries and slight pain in one shoulder, he managed to compose himself and continued. Emerging from the stern of the vessel, he started planting plastic explosives to sink the ship. His sense of pace and speed was impeccable. He worked with pinpoint precision and knew exactly where to position the blast. After inserting the blasting caps into the plastic explosives, he swam a few steps to the side where the bridge was located. Using a magnetic climbing device that he had engineered, he climbed. His arm injury had taken a terrible toll, causing him excruciating agony, but he kept on going. Nearly at the top, he glanced up in the sky and found that the moon had vanished, easing behind dark clouds. It started raining. Shigeru grinned because he knew that the heavy rain was working to his benefit. He made his way gently onto the deck. The floor was littered with a bunch of cigarette butts and bottles of beer, and even though no soul was in sight, he was no amateur, and neither were his rivals. As the rain poured, he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out his state-of-the-art infrared thermal imaging goggles, using them to analyze the area. In an instant, he spotted 2 high-definition surveillance camera systems. Hoping that the heavy rain had camouflaged his fleeting appearance, he hurried quickly to get out of sight. He stopped for a second, spotting a person smoking a cigarette facing the other direction. His distance was so close, just inches away. Without any delay, his tactical knife plunged quickly against the person's back, dragging his neck with his arms with a tight grip towards his direction, and killing him instantly. After a rapid search of his dead body, Shigeru discovered a 2-way radio and a pistol, all of which he had taken. Not far from where he stood, he saw a general arrangement diagram stating the name of the freighter as the Coco Bazan. To his better knowledge, the Coco Bazan was among the container ships used for smuggling weapons by his good friend Peter Katsuyori. With the aid of his tactical knife, he snapped the plastic covering and tore off the diagram from the wall. Quickly running for a steel hatch, he plunged down the steel ladder, and into a well-lit parking area packed with sports cars. He quickly moved towards the prime mover assembly of the ship, which was also the electric propulsion system, and with remote detonators he planted another package of C4 explosives. As soon as he ended, he heard a French-speaking voice on the 2-way radio alerting the men to the location of an intruder. They'd found his location. There were several shots fired, and he barely survived, dodging a bullet that missed him an inch over his shoulders. He escaped without serious injury by releasing 2 grenades. Shigeru felt no remorse as he continued shooting. Enemies have fallen in his path, and the dust settled. He went on following Tammy's signal as a muscular, heavy-jowled Korean unexpectedly emerged, kicking him in the head and throwing him to the floor sprawling. Quickly on his feet, with a whole body spin, he managed to elude another incoming sidekick, this time catching the Korean by his leg on his third attempt and stabbing him in the stomach, totally crippling him before breath escaped him. The trail led Shigeru in front of a reinforced watertight door. "Ouvrez la porte." "Open the door," Shigeru shouted, hitting the door with the butt of his Glock twice. Aided by his infrared thermal imaging goggles, as soon as the wheel handle began to turn, he immediately pressed the detonation button, triggering the C4 explosives, predictably blasting the entire ship and knocking out the lights. Shigeru, now with a clear view of his surroundings, stormed the cabin, hitting all the armed men inside the room. None of the men stood a chance against Shigeru. Tied up on the floor were Tammy, Yuiko, and Kaiko. The price to pay. The next day, in an undisclosed location somewhere in Ichikawa, Tammy, Yuiko, and Kaiko waited patiently on the back of a Kia Sorento, traveling 3 hours and 53 minutes before the vehicle finally slowed down, entering a compound of a 2-story traditional Japanese house. Lorena and Amanda stood in their presence as soon as the car came to a complete stop. Raising the tailgate, they reached out to Yuiko first before assisting the 2 children. Tammy's dazzled reaction to light meant that she had been held in a very dark place, prompting her to avoid light to shield her eyes. Despite her exhaustion, she managed to smile as Amanda lifted her from the car and embraced her tightly. "Did you miss me?" Tammy asked. "Yes, I missed you so much," she exclaimed, breaking down in tears and laughing. Yuiko and the 2 children were made to rest in a room after their reunion, while news of the sunken Koko Basin hit the airwaves. Shigeru, Lorena, and Amanda were all drinking coffee quietly in the kitchen. "Thank you," Lorena said, breaking the silence with a soft smile, while Amanda kneeled in front of him on the floor, kissing her old friend's weary hands before breaking down in tears. During this time, Shigeru remained still and unmoving. He stared past the 2 sisters to the 65-inch flat-screen TV in the living room, which showed an unidentified teenage girl's news flash left in a park, violently beaten to death by an unknown attacker. Grief suddenly reverberated within Shigeru's broken heart. His tears fell, and the 2 sisters watched in terror as the news story unfolded. It was only at that moment that the 2 sisters fully understood the consequence of Shigeru's decision to run towards their aid. Amanda burst into tears once again, collapsing to Shigeru's feet and crying out the name of Shigeru's daughter Maya. Shigeru's confession. The safe house was an upper-class wooden mansion from the Meiji period, 1868 to 1912, an ancestral home of a famous political family who had been Shigeru's friend for many years. After long hours of silent meditation in the garden, Shigeru invited the 3 sisters to a Japanese tea ceremony at the crack of dawn to tell the entire truth about their father's assassination. The Chishitsu tea room was a low-ceiling room with a tatami mat with a beautiful view, looking out on a large ancient cryptomeria tree in the garden, with ukiyo-e prints on the fusuma, sliding doors. There, Lorena, Amanda, and Tammy gathered with Shigeru Takasugi as their host, wearing his kimono. Of the 7 forms of tea ceremonies, Shigeru had chosen Akatsuki no Chaji, held in the early morning of a cold winter day. Before starting with the ceremony, he took a piece of shodo paper, and with a calligraphy brush, he wrote Maya's name in kanji and placed it on a vacant space beside him. The sisters watched in admiration of the beauty of the brushstrokes. Shigeru continued with the boiling of water, and with the cleaning of the things that had already been cleansed. To a simple-minded person, preparing tea is easy, Shigeru explained. You boil water for tea and make green powder, very simple, not confusing. But what you need to know is that sometimes the obvious is the difficult thing to do. Shigeru, making a brief pause as he prepared the green tea. The purpose of the Japanese tea ceremony is to teach humility, respect, appreciation, discipline, and beauty, Shigeru narrated in a soft voice, but hesitated to continue as if he had missed out an important detail. Fighting back the tears, Shigeru took another piece of shodo paper and this time, wrote the name of Peter and handed it to Lorena before bursting into tears. Amanda made an attempt to comfort him, but with the gesture of his hand, he said no. A long silence followed while he gathered strength to continue, and with a restricted voice, he uttered the words, "I was the one who pulled the trigger that killed your father." Neither of the three sisters said anything, transcending indifference to tears, and only through Tammy's piercing cry was a long silence broken. Everybody watched as Tammy fell, screaming as if she was in pain. Amanda, embracing Tammy, cried with her while Lorena's tears soaked his father's calligraphy. At this point, Shigeru stood up and bowed to the children, asking for their forgiveness, saying, "Gomen Nazai." The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a question of life and death, a path either to safety or to ruin. Hence it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. Sun Tzu, Art of War. Maya. Maya Takasugi was Shigeru's daughter to a Swedish news correspondent who died in a plane crash when she was 4. She had stayed with her grandparents all her life since then, though her father had visited her on special occasions. She was exceptionally clever and had always been an honor student. She had natural white blonde hair, hazel eyes, and the finest complexion imaginable. She was very charming but suffered from the genetic condition, albinism, making her life in Japan very difficult. One can only imagine, to be branded as a gaijin, at the same time having that kind of congenital disorder in school. The year was 2000, the 6th of December. Shigeru Takasugi was approached by an agitated Peter Katsuyori at the Grand Hotel coffee shop because of the way the children were abducted in Cebu. Infuriated with his men, Shigeru pulled out his belt buckle to make it up for the children and kept whipping his men in front of everyone. It was pretty brutal, making his men lower their trousers in public, and yet amusing to the children, and they were all laughing. It was a laughable sight, and even Lorena, the reserved one, could not resist laughing at the incident. But, watching from behind, though, she quickly noticed something peculiar. As she stood there, counting her sisters with her finger, there were 3 of them. "Who is the third girl wearing a white jacket with a fur-trimmed hood with Amanda in her arms?" she thought to herself. Slowly, she moved a little closer to the girl, reached for her hood, and immediately pulled it out, revealing her head, and when she turned, her face was as white as a ghost. Lorena screamed out loud. The screaming of Lorena was so loud that the girl was shocked and made her run trembling towards her father. Her name is Maya, and she was Shigeru's daughter. Feeling sorry for pulling her hood, and causing her to get startled, Lorena walked up to her and asked for an apology. As for Tammy and Amanda, they were so amazed at how pale she was, and wanted so much to be her friend, calling her Snow White, and giving her a smile on her face. As time went by, their friendship grew. Maya's presence made the lives of the 3 sisters more bearable and fun, and Maya felt the same way, for she had never received so much attention before in her entire life. All her life, she had been an outcast and lonely, but now she had sisters and was treated as part of the family. Being the same age as Amanda, they were the ones who mingled together more often, always looking after Tammy, while Lorena simply acted like a big sister to all of them. There was even a time when Maya was literally living with them, sharing the same room with Amanda, but things started to change when they reached the 7th grade. Maya had stopped visiting them, and they just lost contact. Her father said she was sick and had to spend some time with her grandparents. Soon, they were reading in the papers that Mr. Shigeru Takasugi was being hunted by the authorities for killing a Japanese lawmaker during a Liberal Democratic Party protest in Tokyo, which made the children sad. Peter Katsuyori, on the other hand, as Shigeru's legal counsel, argued the position of his client as hiding out of fear from the police. The Stone Pond. The odd-shaped granite boulder where he stood used to be Maya's favorite spot while feeding the koi fish has been her favorite pastime, whenever her father was away, and great was the joy on the 2 occasions that they did it together. It pains Shigeru's heart knowing that he had not spent enough time with his daughter when she was still alive, and gazing upon the magnificent koi fish in the water, Shigeru said to himself, "There is still beauty in the world that is worth admiring." Going down on his knees, embracing the very ground Maya had once stood, Shigeru was unaware that Lorena had made her way up to his location from the house, and in a gentle voice, she spoke. "What's the story that I've heard so much about saying that you killed my father, old man?" Aiding his old friend to sit back on the granite rock, she embraces him, holding him onto her shoulders as if asking him to continue the fight. Wiping his tears away, Shigeru stares into nothingness, feeling ashamed to even look at Lorena in the face. "How did you know that I'd come to your aid?" Shigeru asked. "A failed intuition, I guess. Honestly, I was hoping that you weren't involved in the assassination and would come to our aid. But as it turned out, you're the very person who pulled the trigger, but you have come for us still. And for that, I'm forever grateful." There was a loud sound of falling utensils coming from the house. "Do you hear that? That's the sound of Amanda ransacking your kitchen, desperately trying to make a lasagna for you. Isn't that your favorite?" she said, making him laugh and cry at the same time. "Nobody hates you here, old man. You're all we've got." We've indeed grown to love Peter as a father, but unlike Maya, he did a lot of bad things. Maya, on the other hand, is innocent. Your loss is greater than ours, and when the time has come for you to choose between your daughter and my sister, you choose Tammy, she said, causing Shigeru to stare her in the eyes. "How is she doing?" he asked. "Give her some time. She had a deep connection with Peter, but she's a smart young lady. She'll come to her senses eventually. I never intended to hurt any of you." "Yes, I know. Everything happens for a reason, and we have forgiven you," Lorena replied. Crimes of the tent robotics. Guilt-stricken, Shigeru felt lost in dealing with the situation following the loss of his daughter. His vengeful spirit shone through his aura, but he tried so much to suppress it in the presence of Lorena. During the conversation, Lorena took the opportunity to ask Shigeru what he knows about the ill-gotten practices of the tent robotics. "What do you know about the whole brain emulation?" Lorena asked, catching his attention. "Where did you learn that?" "Well, before you murdered my father, and I don't mean to inculpate, he left me with a thumb drive containing the list of projects of the tent robotics. The whole brain emulation program is one of the projects mentioned." "Where is the thumb drive?" "On a safe place," she replied. The whole brain emulation program is a project created by Peter. Back then, he was a different person. He used to be the silent embodiment of the Merchant of Death, and he compelled me to do his dirty works. He was a mad scientist. But something happened on his trip to Cebu that changed him. For the first time, I saw goodness in him, and you and your sisters were responsible for that. Remember the time when Maya stopped going to your house?" "Yes. That's when Yūrei ordered the tent robotics to kidnap Maya without Peter's permission. They had experimented on her using the whole brain emulation program." "Why did they choose Maya?" "It has something to do with her brain being compatible with the program. At that point, Peter wanted out, but the Yūrei threatened to kill you and your sisters if he didn't comply. It was Peter's defiance that led the Yūrei to order me to assassinate him, promising that he will return my daughter and let you and your sisters live." "I'm sorry to hear that, but what do they intend to do with the program?" "I don't have any idea. All I know is that they've spent billions of dollars to make it happen. We should take a closer look at that thumb drive." Unable to suppress her emotions, she turned to her side with a dull pain in her stomach. "Lorena, are you okay?" Shigeru asked. "Not so much. I have a peptic ulcer. According to my doctor, anxiety sometimes triggers it, but I'll be fine." "Is there anything I can do?" "You can get me yogurt inside the house for probiotics." Okay, hold on 1 second. Shigeru rushed to the house, grabbed a pint of yogurt, a spoon, a bunch of napkins, and hurried back to Lorena. Seeing the napkins, she laughed unexpectedly. "What do you intend to do with all that napkin?" she asked. "I don't know, but it made you laugh." "You silly old man," Lorena said, smiling. "By the way, how were you able to find Tammy's location?" she added. "Tammy has an encrypted GPS tracking system in her brain implants," he replied. Things began to fall into place as she listened to Shigeru. The Yūrei deliberately used Peter to serve his purpose, being a well-established businessman, but of all the things that Shigeru revealed, the real cause of the Great Fire shocked her the most. As she listened attentively to his narration, an endless flow of tears fell from her eyes, discovering that the heroism of the man who rescued them from the blaze was nothing but a great lie. But as Shigeru went on, to her surprise, he explained that all of that had been orchestrated right from the beginning. "Say what? How can it be orchestrated if it was an accident?" she asked. "Based on Peter's account of what happened, I believe the Yūrei had some influence on his behavior, as he was feeling disoriented that day. Someone may have given him a drug. Peter has a photographic memory, especially when it comes to directions, but something caused him to get lost on those narrow paths, causing him to cast the gas lamp he was carrying in your home." Not knowing how to respond to what he said, Lorena took a moment to absorb the gravity of the situation, and in a low voice, she said, "Are you listening to your own words? You're trying to make me believe that the Yūrei have the supernatural abilities that make it possible for him to cast a spell on others, rendering them obedient to his bidding. That's what you're saying?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I know none of this is believable, but I've seen far too many things that defy the laws of physics and nature." Looking at Shigeru and knowing him for a long time, she knew she had no reason not to believe him. "So, how are we going to catch the Yūrei?" Lorena asked. "Have you gone completely insane? You have assisted your father in his illegal transactions. Have you spoken to anyone other than the courier? He has no known associate who can identify his location. He hires various assets for particular tasks and uses their loved ones to force them to submit to his bidding. So even though you found someone who knows where he is, chances are, you won't get anything from that person, and don't forget the long list of assassins that he employs and the dark force he wields, which resembles that of a Jedi." "You mean a Sith Lord," she replied. "Yes, you're right. My mistake. Okay, setting aside your negativity. If we do go after the Yūrei, are you willing to help us?" "Yes, of course, what else am I supposed to lose?" "It's your funeral," he answered.